Okay.
Okay. So finally, is the question: is social class still important? Some have said it's declining as a form of identity. As classes become fragmented, as we don't have that, we don't really have, working class, middle class and upper class. It's all becoming so changed and so varied that it's no longer homogenous, it's no longer a working class which is all the same or a middle class which is all the same. It's all too changeable. Then other forms of identity have become important. Some of the stuff we've looked at previously, gender, sexuality, and we're going to look at next week, we're going to look at nationality and ethnicity as being a more important form of identity. Some have said that these forms of identity have overtaken class as a form of identity. Oh, there we go. Gender, ethnicity, religion, consumer lifestyles, age is another one, subcultures. You're a young person who's really into a certain kind of music. That part of your identity is more important than the fact that your dad worked in a factory, for example. So there is an argument that class isn't as important as it was. Things are very different. So some have talked about, and this is a common thing that you may read in text, the death of class. Pekulski and Waters have said that class has been replaced with lifestyle and consumption patterns as more important sources of identity. It's the way it's our lifestyle choices, it's the way that, it's the things that we buy, it's the music that we listen to and all that kind of stuff, which is more important as a form of identity than our class. As we live in a sort of hyper-consumerist society, a consumerist society which is, speeding up, then what we consume becomes more important to our sense of identity. Lash and Urry also say that class subcultures have weakened. People are more individualistic. They are less influenced by communities and by work. I've talked before about the postmodern era, about how identity has become shifting and changing. We have the freedom to choose our identity, and in fact we're not stuck in this one form of identity. We can pick and choose, and we are more individualistic as well. It's more important who you are rather than as an individual, rather than who you are as a member of a group. And because you don't have a job for life, you don't live near the factory that you work in with your friends and family. You have a job which is different. I'm sure most of you don't share the same jobs with your friends. We all have different jobs. So your work and your position has less of an importance to you than other things in terms of your identity. Oh yeah, there we go. Postmodernists argue that identity is too fluid and shifting to say that class identity is a thing, or is as much of a thing as it used to be. So we could say, do we have the death of class, or is it still important? So you've got the death of class, or its continued importance. Many people still identify with their class. Also important to note that, like other forms of identity, it may be imposed by others. So people in the underclass or in sort of certain sections of the working class may have an image projected onto them. As in their identity, again, I keep on saying this, but your identity is not something necessarily that you choose. It is the way that people see you. So if you are a member of the, so-called underclass, and you have the typical trappings of somebody in the underclass, and you're waiting outside a job centre, then people will identify you in a certain way. They'll say, oh, that person there, they're in a job centre, he You know, it's you know, a Tuesday morning. He's obviously a bit of a waster. You know, that I'm not saying that's what I think, but that may be a perception of them. Especially these days, if you think about what I've said about the demonisation of the working class, about how the media portrays them in a negative light, then their identity becomes something which people see rather than something which they choose. So it may be that you can interview people and they say class isn't important to me, but it might be important because of how other people see them. Class identity is strong, but for some, class identity is changing, but for some it is still strong. You can have a look at this. I've got an example of a chart in a moment, but this is from the British Social Attitudes Survey, and there's some interesting ideas in the British Social Attitudes Survey. So if you did want to look at this article, you can find it. You know, just follow the link. But I cut out a chart from it, which I'm going to show you now. Which they asked people from between 1983 and 2012 in his social attitude survey. They asked them what their class, and of all the people, 6 out of 10 people in this British Social Attitude Survey said they were working class. 6 out of 10. It's quite a surprising number of people say that they're working class. And we can see that the numbers haven't really changed. So we've got 83 to 2012, and what they did is that they asked people what their class was, and people said, "Oh, I'm middle class or I'm working class." If they didn't answer whether they were middle or social class, then the next question was, some people say they're working class and some people say they're middle class. Which one are you? So it's first of all they said, what class are you? Then they asked them to choose whether they were middle or working class. So you've got here unprompted middle class is where they didn't tell them if they were middle class or not, and then prompted middle class. Are you middle class or working class? And what they found was that more people, unprompted, said they were working class than said they were middle class. And what you've ended up with is 6 out of 10 say they are working class. And then the percentage of people who did not identify with any class was really low. So it is still important if we look at these British social attitude surveys. We've gone from 6% said they did not identify with any class to 5% did not identify with any class. If you want to, and like I said, that document is available online. You can follow the link. It's huge. There's like hundreds of pages, but there's some interesting. It's a British social attitude survey. It's a whole range of information in it. So, the question still remains, is social class as a form of identity still important? That's kind of the end of the lecture. Went on longer than I thought it would.
Shall I stop?
Yes.